Welcome to If Only You Knew, where each week we take a deep dive into the careers and experiences of people from different backgrounds, cultures, countries, and ages to discuss pivotal moments in their lives and the lessons they have learnt along the way.
If they told people the truth, they wouldn't last very long.
Whether you're a school student in an established career, mapping your academic pathway, searching for the perfect career, looking to change careers, or just plain curious, then this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Christy McCormack, and I want to ask you, what would you do differently if only you knew? With me today is a laboratory media supervisor. Never heard of this job? Me either before I started researching for this episode. So I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from my next guest, Miriam Tschirren. Welcome, Miriam, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi, no problem. Lovely to meet you, Christy.
Now, I have to say, I've been really looking forward to speaking with you because we haven't ever met before. And you're initially very hesitant and probably still are hesitant to talk to me. I believe you said something to the effect of, no, I'm not where I want to be yet. And as soon as I heard this, I knew I just had to speak to you because you're exactly the reason why I started this podcast, the person that I wanted to speak to. There's very few people who are exactly where they want to be. And many have not followed the straight path that we're either told that we need to or we believe that we should. Everyone's journey is unique, and what people want from their lives and careers differs so much. And that's the message of this podcast. So I thank you so much for taking that hesitance and jumping right in and having a chat with me.
No problem at all.
Okay, so you've got a very accomplished career and highly educated with a lot of other talents, which we'll get to later. But I first wanted to ask you to explain exactly what a laboratory media supervisor is.
Okay, I think it was a title that was created by the company itself, but essentially I look after the production of all the media for a microbiology lab, which is like all your agar plates, your petri dishes, your broths, and things like that they use in the laboratory to test for different bacteria and strains, so that the food that we're eating and drinking and all that sort of stuff doesn't contain levels of bacteria that could make us very sick, essentially.
That's very interesting. So do you have a typical day, and what would that day look like?
I have very chaotic days. My typical day is I get in and I'm pretty much running from the moment I'm in the door to the moment I'm out the door. I essentially look after all the media for the Brisbane micro section, which would be very high level production. And I have about 5 different machines running at any one point in time. So I troubleshoot machinery as well as do a lot of hand pouring and production manual things as well. So there's still a lot of manual tasks that need to happen. But for me, I'm looking after it by myself predominantly. So it requires me to actually have multiple facilitators, which are machinery, essentially.
So does that mean that your role is clinical or not clinical? And could you explain the difference between those for us?
It's not clinical. I'm behind everything. So what would clinical would be somebody who's actually at the front line with the patient, dealing with them, giving them diagnosis, giving them potential treatment process. So they're like your nurses, your doctors and things like that. They're at the front. I'm non-clinical, where we're behind the scenes. We get all the blood, or in our lab, I deal with microbiology. So we get all the food and water and things like that. And they're just regular things that we test. So it's repeat clients. It's all the stuff that you see in supermarkets, but we're at the back line and we make sure that within those products, there's no bacteria or things that are unfavorable to us or at levels that are unfavorable to us to make us sick. So we test that.
So your clients are basically the food industry?
Correct. And water, like bits and pieces like that.
So do they regulate themselves in a sense where they proactively test products, or do they have to have a certain amount of products tested by legislation or something like that?
A combination. So a lot of companies or people who produce the food, so it's not like specific companies necessarily themselves, it's the backline, so the providers of food to bigger companies. They often have their own laboratories and they do their own internal tests, but they do require to have external testing done by someone who so my word's not thinking of the right word right now,
Okay.
but basically they need to do external testing.
So independent sort of testing.
That's correct, yeah. So they need independence because otherwise people can fake things. So they need independence, and then they need those independence for it to be governmentally approved and put forward. They need to have government accreditation, so NATA accreditation, so the National Australian Therapeutics and Goods Association. They monitor us and they approve us to be part of that, which then gives approval to those companies that what they're doing is correct.
So is most of your work really high turnaround, like really quickly, or is there sort of time to be able to do the testing, or is it just really, look, we need this and we need it yesterday?
There's plenty of that, but tests you can't push faster than they go because bacteria have a growth period time. So most of our bacteria obviously need to be put through incubation. So basically we take a sample of food or water and we put them in a particular broth that's designed to get some growth out of it to see if there's anything, because all our goods are organic, so they are going to grow things. That's not unheard of. So you put them under conditions that are like our digestive system. So a lot of things are put in incubators that are like at 37 degrees. Between 37 and 42 degrees, we often test like a spectrum, but we're trying to find out how those bacteria grow and how much growth we get from those bacteria depending on what we're looking for. And then the results we get are basically trying to identify at what quantities those bacteria are growing and whether that's okay for human consumption or not. And there are strains that each bacteria, there's multiple strains. So we're trying to identify which ones are the more problematic ones. And if they are, then they have to notify those companies.
So has that turned you off eating or drinking anything? Like, have you had to tailor your diet to sort of like specific things that you just don't, that have come back positive, or?
It makes you think, but we are organic as well, and we don't create immune systems ourselves without being exposed to different things. So we do have to be logical in how we do things. It's just you are a bit more aware, like there are certain things that you definitely do think about. There are certain things you probably avoid more, you would realize. So yes, there are certain things that I definitely am more hyper aware of, and things that I'll wash more, or things that I would just refuse to eat, or things that I'll cook, because cooking, obviously heat will kill a lot of things. So there are certain things that you would cook more. Like, for example, in Japan, they don't have as much salmonella in their soil as we do in Australia. They eat raw chicken. We would never eat raw chicken.
Yeah.
But in Japan, it's really rare for that to be a problem because salmonella comes from the soil and that's what gets onto all your food. That's why you don't eat raw chicken, and it should be cooked. So like in Japan, there's less common because their soils don't really contain salmonella, whilst it is very high in Australia. So that's why I would highly recommend you need to cook your chicken really well. So there's different things like that.
I overcook chicken all the time because of the risk of salmonella, but I did not realize that it came from soil. That's so interesting. Yeah.
There are a lot of things that basically there are like a lot of nuts contain salmonella. They're a lot higher than a lot of other food products for the same reason, because it comes from the soil. If they're picked up from the ground, that's where you're going to get more likely to. But like anything, it's only a problem when we know, like we're testing for it on a regular basis. There are problematic things and problematic situations. It's just being a bit more aware of the fact that these things are around you all the time.
Absolutely. I don't know if that's like scary or it is making me feel a little bit more calmer about the situation.
We also have to remember we are like vessels of bacteria, so at the same time. So
definitely. Yeah, bit gross to me. I think that's why I couldn't go into the medical field, because things just make me go, oh, can't deal with that.
Yeah.
But you completed a Bachelor of Health Science, majoring in Biomedical Science. So I did do some research for this episode because I didn't want to come on here and be completely clueless with you. But could you explain what that degree is?
Basically, it's a touch into the medical industry. So I'm actually not working in the medical industry, but basically it's how the biomechanics of the human body works. And you would then look at testing, like it would be in the laboratory area. So it's not your frontline type of thing. It's the same thing as the food industry. but you would be in the medical field with biomedical, and you're looking for problematic stuff, whether it's cellular, like it could be like cancers, or you'd be looking at research into diseases of some sort, and that would be that kind of aspect of it. So it's more the medical side of that same field.
So what made you sort of go off into the food industry as opposed to the medical side of it?
Hard to get a job.
Really?
Yes and no. It's a combination. Like a lot of jobs, it's experience gets you further. So getting into a laboratory, regardless of what it was ideal, just to get some hands-on experience, because there is crossover. You still do a lot of similar type of things. The only difference is you're looking for different bacteria in different mediums. So in biomedical or medical fields, you'd be looking at like human body that you'd be looking for bacteria in. So it'd be like bloods and fluids of sorts and things like that. Whereas in the food industry, you're doing the same actions, but you're looking at it from food or water. So it's just a different fluid, but you're still looking for the bacterial. So you'll cross over between what you're actually physically doing in a laboratory as opposed to what you're looking for. So they're very similar.
So you
different.
can cross over. Can you, with your degree, you can cross over between the two, or are you sort of now on that path of a food industry, food and water industry, or can you sort of go back and forth between if the right job sort of pops up for you?
I could go back and forth. I'm more advantageous in a medical industry because my knowledge is there. Like I could probably get a bit higher and a bit more into technical stuff because I actually understand what's happening in that field. This is where it's not similar, as in like I understand the bacteria and the behaviors of them and what they're doing in our body better than I understand the bacteria and how they behave individually in food and water, if that makes sense. So yes, there's crossover, but there isn't crossover. This is why their sciences are divided. They're not put together under the same banner. So yes, I could move back and forth. My ideal would be preferably medical. It interests me a little bit more what happens in our body than the stuff that's happening externally, though that's fascinating. It's not my interest as much.
So I was sort of going to bring up COVID a little bit later, but sort of talking about the job availability in the medical field and how limited they are. Do you think COVID will change that? Do you think there'll be more jobs available in that sort of area?
There's definitely jobs available. I meant that I couldn't really find a job purely because I wasn't prepared to do night shift or 24-hour shift work. A lot of medical stuff is that, and it is even in biomedical, in microbiology as well, just for the sheer fact that people want turnaround and want results really quickly. So I wasn't really ideally looking to do that kind of work. Everybody is different. The money can be better if you're prepared to do those hours and if you find a way to accommodate it, totally. But yeah, there is going to be definitely a big shift just for the sheer fact that some governmental bodies and things like that, it's not their area of understanding that even though we're a lot further in our sciences and our understanding of things, we are still really far to go because viruses have this incredible capacity to mutate and change really rapidly and interact with other ones at a far faster rate in ways that we can't even imagine because we don't know. So it takes years for a lot of tests and trials to make sure that people aren't going to get sick or injured or problematic from medical developments and help. So yeah, it's not a fast turnaround. It is and it isn't. It's a lot faster than it used to be, but it's still slow. So definitely going to be an industry that will grow for that reason.
Do you think the government needs to put more investment into that? Because obviously with COVID, there's been a lot of reactional money put into the economy and the health system, but not so much as far as upfront research. Do you think that should change?
I think it definitely needs to be put forward as an important part because this is probably not going to be the last time we come across something so dramatic. We live a lot closer to each other. There's a lot more people per capita. Like the most amazing thing about COVID is the people don't understand that it actually takes a perfect storm for something to mutate in the way it did. That was not designed to come to humans, but we live so close and we're so on top of each other and there's so much interaction of everything that it gave the opportunity for that to happen a lot easier than you think at the same time. And it actually takes a perfect storm. Like, all the things have to line up for that to actually happen. It's not as easy as it comes across. So that's actually a pretty impressive thing when you look at it from the behavioral standpoint, but very scary for us because we don't understand it as a normal educational understanding. So it's very quick. So yes, it's definitely something that governments need to understand, that this is not going to be the first or the last. And the more investment you put into the sciences and the medicals and all that kind of industry, we will be better prepared for anything else that comes up in the future and ways of being faster acting towards those sorts of things.
Absolutely, because we wouldn't really know when that perfect storm is gonna hit. It's just could be tomorrow with a new one.
Literally. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. We're advantageous in that I think the way that virus works is it doesn't mutate as quickly as some others, but still we're so naive in knowing how much, like even me saying that's really naive because I could be really wrong. But yeah, so things it's perfect storm. Like,
Yeah.
things can change constantly in an instant, and viruses are designed to live. They are very good at their job.
That's a really good insight. So thank you very much for that.
That's
Now,
right.
I wanted to know, because obviously your field is quite specialized and it's not something that majority of people would sort of know about or have an understanding of. So how did you decide to go down that path?
Interesting story. So when I was at university, at school, I learnt that I was reasonably good at the sciences, and I had a real fascination for the human body, and I was doing really well at one point at high school with the science area, and then I got into, doing TEE, getting ready for, I don't know what they call it here. We call it TEE in Perth. Like your tertiary exam type
Oh,
stuff.
okay. Yeah,
So year 11 and 12.
12, yeah.
So you had to choose your subjects, and I didn't have a very good science teacher, so I didn't do as well. I had planned to do physio because I had a fascination for the body and wanting to work with people, and I didn't have the scores the way I expected to, so I started to look at alternative ways of potentially getting into physio. And then I started looking at natural therapies as well. So I actually did a natural therapy diploma on the side, as well as I did, what else did I do? Oh, and a biomedical degree. So I did
Oh, just a biomedical degree.
I did two educations side by side. So I did a diploma in natural medicine, so herbal medicine and remedial massage, and as well as, just give me a sec, give a bit more light. And then also, yeah, a biomedical degree at the same time. So I did a trimester with a full-time uni degree at the same time. So I did a very intense study all at once.
That would have been full on to do those in parallel.
Yeah, I was a bit of sucker for punishment.
So did you decide to do those at the same time because you weren't decided yet on which sort of route you wanted to take?
Yeah, kind of. I didn't have the marks to get where I wanted to go, so I tried to find an alternative to get where I wanted to go. But
Mhm.
as I was studying it, my interests varied a lot throughout the process. I really loved natural therapies. There was a lot of benefit and interest that I got out of it, and a lot of skill sets that I learned for myself in particular. And I also just enjoyed the biomedical side of things. I did a nutrition minor as well, so I also learned a lot about nutrition. And yeah, I think I just started to want to learn a little bit about everything, and then I didn't really know where I wanted to go. Yeah.
I think
So
that's like a lot of people, they really don't know where they want to go, sorry. And also with regards to school, a lot of kids, they think that they are going to get the marks that they want to get into the courses that they want to, and they don't, and then they feel completely lost. So
yeah.
what is your advice to kids like that don't get the marks that they want, but absolutely have the potential to reach the goals that they want to reach, what would you suggest to them?
Don't be perturbed by what the results come out at school. Like, it was a little bit different when I went to school, but I think also which school you go to and their marks also has effect on your marks, which is not fair,
No.
because the individual themselves is the one that's the skill at the end of it, and they're the one that are going to end up with a career at the end of it. So you can't even influence your own marks at the end of the day because you're influenced by everything else, and that's not fair. So definitely I wouldn't go on marks alone. People's skill sets are so varied. I'm a very practical person, so my theoretical side, I'm not necessarily the best at theory and reading and writing. I can definitely do it, and I'm educated enough too. But if you're going to put me down to a skill set, I'm extremely practical. So you show me something once, I'll be able to repeat it in seconds, and I'm good at my job at that. And that can get you places you wouldn't even imagine, better than somebody who's really educated and just hasn't got the practical skills. So there are many ways to get where you want to go, and often they're actually better, because if you have to go through different hoops to get where you want to be, you learn skill sets beyond the person who's just been able to get into what they want, because you've had to work for something, and your drive to be there means that you're more passionate about what you want to be and where you want to be. You have far more interest, you will have more growth, and you'll learn things that are beyond those that get there, and you're more likely to move up quicker or be able to be in a higher position because you've learned other skill sets along the way. I'd say it's actually sometimes a better way to go through things than to be given it straight up off the bat.
I could not agree with you more. But there are people that take that straight line path, and kudos to them. But I
It's
myself have never
fantastic.
been one of those people. But
Yeah.
always sort of gone the wavy line. So yeah, I can 100% relate to that one. You did your university degree in Perth, and
Correct.
then now you're in Brisbane. So
Yeah.
that's a huge move from
Yeah.
one side of the country to the other.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Actually, it was dating Stefan. It was dating my partner. I've been with my partner for 19 years now. We were pretty young. It was easy to move. I am very much a firm believer of what would stop us from doing it. What are the positives and what are the negatives for making the big step? And just kind of looked at the situation and realized that it was far beneficial for him, but it was also not my choice. I wanted to follow him. I was happy to follow him, but I didn't want him to regret the decision of it being my fault for choosing for him, because we weren't married. There's a lot of other variables in it. And at the end of the day, I said, we can always move back if things don't work out. Like, got to give it a try. What's stopping us from trying? So it was actually because of him.
So blame him. Although you're out of Perth, so that's you're on.
Yeah, no, I'm happy. I love it here.
Yeah, Perth's beautiful. I was there a few months ago before the whole COVID struck, but yeah, Brisbane is fantastic, isn't it? So
I like both cities for different reasons. They both have their own advantages. I'm very much a positive thinker. So you can sit here and wish you had things you didn't have that you can't change, or you can see what you do have and you can look at the great things that come out of it. So depends on the personality. Cup half full, cup half empty. So either way.
love that. So you went from being a laboratory assistant to sort of a reception administration role when you moved from Perth to Brisbane. How did you sort of cope with that in regards to where you wanted to be with your career? Because obviously you've moved over with your partner, but how did you see that did you see it as a sort of derailment to your own goals, or just a growth period?
It's a bit of both. So when we moved, we made an agreement that I wasn't going to do a 24-hour shift work. We wanted to have time together because, you live life and you need to enjoy it at the same time. Different people prioritize different things. I wouldn't prioritize work over having a wonderful home and family life personally. But if work is what your passion is, then totally go for it. So that was an agreement. It found it really hard to find a job, especially moving. So I actually went back to hospitality first.
Oh, okay.
So my first ever job was hospitality when I was 15. So I knew it was really easy for me to get work. So I started working in hospitality. I started teaching dance classes. I started teaching fitness classes. And I did that when we first moved until I got to a point where I got tired of not having a stable income, because that kind of work is work influential, like you've either got something happening or you don't have anything at all. So I then eventually decided I just need a stable job, and fortunately, where my husband worked, they needed admin and reception, so I gave that a go.
And then you headed back to the lab after
Correct.
a stint in reception and admin. So were you happy with that decision? Is that what you aim to get back into it, or did that just sort of come about as another sort of change in the next sort of step in your career?
I wanted to get back into the lab, so the admin work was really just to get me to have some stability for a bit while I find a job. And I enjoyed it in the beginning. I also got a little lazy looking for work, as humans do. So then I just sat with it for a little while, but it became too boring. I spent a lot of time there and it wasn't mentally stimulating for me or physically stimulating. So I went, no, I really need to work on doing something that actually uses my education. So then I decided to go back into lab work and started looking and found a job.
That's awesome, because I think people do become complacent and you can sort of fall into the rut of, oh, I'm just going to keep working in this job because it's paying my bills. So
Correct.
to be able to sort of forcefully move yourself out of that space into, no, I'm going to go back into what I really want to do and what I've sort of put so much time and effort into is really impressive.
I actually cut the admin job off, and it was 13 months in between before I actually found a lab job. So there were 13 months of me just casually doing hospitality. But I found that when I was full-time in the admin role, I just never found the energy or the time to actually look for work. So I thought the only way I could make myself change is force my own hand, and not having a job meant I had to start really working.
And that's a big risk to take. And, it's obviously paid off for you, because now you're in the role that, you're back in the lab and you're doing everything that you want to do, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you find, obviously you're looking for more mental stimulation. Is the lab work really stressful? Is it really high pressure, or is it more the diverse sort of things that you look at is where you get your mental stimulation from?
Different combinations. So I'm either somebody who needs to be mentally stimulated or physically stimulated. I'm a very active person, so my role is very physical. I'm lifting a lot of heavy things. I'm moving a lot of stuff around. I'm never sitting down. I run from one side of my section to the other side, constantly pushing big trolleys around, constantly doing things with my hands. I'm just busy, and I don't actually have time to think. It's so busy. And then that's probably what is boring me a little bit, is because it's a repetitious kind of job, which most lab is, because you're just repeating the same thing over and over again because it's an accuracy game. I need something that switches my brain on for a little bit. I think I'm hitting that point where I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I've got a streamline sort of system going. It is stressful and busy because I've got to make sure that the lab has everything it needs to be able to run, because on the weekends, I'm not there to make anything. I'm not there to look after them. I'm not there to sterilize anything. They need to look after themselves, and they need to have everything there ready for them to be able to do that over the weekend, because otherwise clients have delayed results and that'll be my fault. And I don't want it to be my fault.
No, that would not be very good. I don't think many people would really envision someone working in a lab as a physically demanding sort of role either. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that. When you sort of think about lab, you sort of think about somebody in a white coat sitting at a desk or a table with a microscope, looking at, little things under slides. Oh, it would be great if you could do like a day in your life in a video. I would love that.
Just different areas. So it depends what you're actually working on in the lab. There are many different sections. There'll be people standing most of the day, just almost in one spot, doing the same repetitive process. Like some people in our lab, they're just sampling food. So they're sitting there, they're standing in the one spot all day sampling food. There'll be others pouring bottles with broth into those bags. That's where you grow stuff. So there'll be people pouring stuff all day. There'll be other people using pipettes all day, putting little micro volumes into little things. There'll be somebody who will sit at the microscope all day counting how many bacteria are on that, how many little growths do I have, and there'll be other people. But my area is just excessively physical. I deal with like all the sterilization of those products that I make. So I use like they're basically high pressure cookers, but really high pressure cookers, like massive size, massive heat, massive pressure, and I'm lifting big bottles and things in and out of that sort of stuff. So yeah, big shift of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely not what I imagined the role to encompass. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I know obviously you're very physically active because I know you've got a passion for dancing.
Yes.
And I know that you're very good at it because you've also danced around the world. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that? And obviously you said earlier that you've taught dancing. So is this something that you would look to as a full-time career, or is this a hobby?
It's a paid hobby. So
Best ones.
yeah, it definitely is. So with me, I have a passion for dancing. I wouldn't consider myself like, the best, but I love what I do and it gives me so much joy and happiness. And I think a lot of people get lost in their work life and they don't have an enjoyment outside of it. I do my work, whilst I do like my work, I don't love it. So I like to enjoy having something outside of work to look forward to. And I've always danced and I have taught and performed and things and been paid, but doing it as a profession is not very financially viable on long term. It's very unpredictable. And depending, like some people have had far more training than me in dance styles. What I do for a hobby is not necessarily something that can make a very permanent income. You would have to do a lot of other stuff to be able to make that a permanent income. Whereas there are professional dancers who've done a variety of dance styles and they're able to perform in Broadways and different things that will give them that as a career. Whereas what I do is literally just more of a paid hobby.
Although you have been, was it Japan that you went to most recently?
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
So it's carnival, it's Brazilian style of dancing. So it's hyper energetic, lots of like color and life and fun, and it equates to basically interval sprint training for the whole time that you dance.
Wow.
So it's very good exercise and it's hyper energy. It's a hell of a lot of fun and it feeds my active and creative side.
That's beautiful. So do you think that keeps that balance then between a role that you find a little bit repetitious and probably not as mentally stimulating as what you would like, to be able to sort of put up with that for a bit longer than what you perhaps wouldn't if you didn't have that creative outlet somewhere else?
Oh, for sure. I was a music scholarship student. I played music from a child. I did ballet since I was a kid. I did flamenco when I was a child as well. And I've danced all throughout growing up, and just that side of me needs to be fed. Otherwise, I go stir crazy. I make my own costumes as well. So
Wow.
and I help dance schools when I've been in part of choreographies. I've been asked to create the costume and then teach people how to make their own version of it and stuff like that. So it does feed my creative side a lot, which I really enjoy.
So if you could walk away from what you do at the moment and go into dancing full time and make a really good living out of it, would you?
Probably. Yeah. But at the same time, I still love what I do. Like I think if I was in a slightly more mentally stimulating area, like I probably enjoy more research type of base. I think I would enjoy doing both at the same time, but I still think that, yeah, if I was given the option, if I could do it, I probably would.
So what's next for you professionally? So if you were to go into sort of more of a research role, would you then have to go on and do any additional study, or would that be a role that you could get from as a progression from where you are at the moment?
I think I would have to do a little bit more study, but I've actually come to a conclusion that I want to do something completely different.
Wow, okay.
Something I would not have known or
That's
would not
fantastic.
have been emotionally ready for when I was younger. Just not. So that's a completely interesting part.
So big things to come from Miriam then. We might have to redo this interview in, 12 months' time and see where you're at.
Yeah, that's if I decide to take the plunge.
So we're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of people sort of changing up things at the moment, especially, due to COVID, because they're either forced to, because, they're pushed out of their roles, or just because they've made that decision that the life is not going on the trajectory that they want it to go on.
Yeah.
So do you think that has sort of pushed you in the way of where you want to go, or do you look to other people and see, oh, well, they've done it, so I can do it too?
No, I've been thinking about this concept of change for a long time. So I actually realized I probably wanted to study psychology.
Wow, okay.
So it's been something that definitely a long time ago, it's been sitting at the back of my mind for a long time and probably become more and more prevalent over the last few years. But I would not be understanding of that without all the experiences that I've had in my life. Like I know that having come, if I went and did it out of high school, I would not have known what progression I would have gone through or what it really meant. I needed to have my own emotional, mental growth to be able to realize that that might be something that suits me and to also know what area of psychology I actually really am interested in. And I needed to have that life experience before I could even choose that. I think psychology is something that is one of those things you have to have had time and experience and emotional growth for that one to really suit. I think it's not one that a high school student would really be able to be ready for, I think.
I couldn't agree more, because I think, in psychology, you're taking on so many people's problems, and to be able to mentally process that yourself, I think you have to be mature enough to understand the distinction between somebody else's problem and them telling you that, and then your own life. Is
Exactly.
that how you see it? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also like you need to have had your own emotional growth to be able to have a bit of empathy, but also a subjective view on what's happening without you having experienced any of your own emotional growth and you giving advice to somebody else. How are you really to understand what's actually going on without having gone through some of your own growth? And that only comes with time. So,
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. So are
so
you
yeah.
planning on studying part-time or full-time, or you just haven't decided yet?
I haven't fully decided. I need to have a really good look into what I want specifically and what would be of interest in which area and where I would need to go. So yeah, I need to look in a little bit more detail. But timing is probably good because universities are in a difficult place and they need as many students as they can get. So it's probably an advantageous time to take into
Definitely.
account.
Take advantage of the bad times, definitely.
I mean, yeah, there's good and bad that comes out of every situation. So
Oh,
probably,
absolutely.
yeah,
Look, I think it's really admirable, because many people feel that once they sort of commit to one career and then they pay, huge amounts of money to go to university and study something, that they're set in that one trajectory and that they can only move forward using that one degree. So I think to be able to broaden that and take a step out and to really invest in yourself is something that is a big decision, but I think a lot of people won't make it, and then they don't appreciate the things that they can get from the rest of their life.
exactly. I think I'm a very future thinker, like in my general life. Like I have a very future brain, as in like everything I do in my life, I look for what's coming up. So I'm always very much a future projector, and I always look at the fact that we're in here now and we live a lot longer than we ever used to, and we will keep living a lot longer, and we have to be in careers for a lot longer than we were previously. So even if it takes 10 or 12 years and I'm in my mid 40s by the time I'm done, I still have another 20, 30 years that I'm expected to work. Like, that's still a long time.
Exactly. When you look at it like
So,
that, you want to be doing something that you enjoy and something that you love, because, otherwise that's a depressing situation to envision.
and also it's a great thing in that your body is only capable of doing a certain amount of things physically. So looking for a career that potentially you can do for longevity reasons is something to look at as well. I wouldn't change anything for the world. Like it's just you have to go through certain steps to see where you need to go sometimes.
Definitely. And look, as I said at the start of this is exactly what this podcast is about. It's about everybody's journey is unique, and the stories that they're able to share with people and hopefully inspire somebody to make that positive change within their life. But I do have to ask you, what would what is the thing that you would do differently if only you knew?
I don't think I would change anything really, because I wouldn't know where I would want to go if I hadn't gone through the hoops and the steps and the places and the workplaces and the situations that I did now to know where I wanted to be potentially. And I feel like that constantly changes anyway. And the ability to be exposed to new situations gives you the opportunity to find things about yourself and gives you growth. So I probably wouldn't change a thing.
That's awesome. And I think that's a very psychologist answer. So I think you really want to make it in that industry. So well done.
No problem.
So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, Miriam. I know that, as I said earlier, you were a bit hesitant, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share your journey with people.
No
And
problem.
look, I hope we can catch up again soon and see what the next step for Miriam has been, and see how much you're loving going back to uni.
Yeah, we'll see where it takes me. All right.
So if you want to know more about Miriam, you can follow her on LinkedIn or check out her bio on our website. And hopefully Miriam might be able to share some images of those costumes that she designed. So we can post on our website at ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au. Thanks, Miriam.
No problems. Thank you, Christy.
For more information about our guests or our show, visit ifonlyyouKnewpodcast.com.au.
I will hold my side.